even doing a panel like this or a signing, it's just not something I ever expected to do. I just thought it would be something that would be kind of a hermit, do my thing, and now it's completely flip-flopped. And it's definitely not something, I feel at times like we're in an alternate reality, you know? Because like it's surreal to me that everyone knows who Iron Man is, and that people are talking about, you know, Batman Hush coming out on DVD. Like what? Like I remember back in the early days of comics, like getting a crappy Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher movie was like, oh my god, this is so exciting. It was such a like, oh my god, we're gonna make this. Oh my god, they made it. Like, and
oh, they made it.
yeah. So it was really different.
Like David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury. Come on.
That's right. Yeah.
It wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
No, it was, but
Yeah.
I mean, we loved it because it was. You don't have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom. But you know, it was ours, and we had it. We had Captain America with Rev Brown. Remember that? With the clear plexiglass shield. It was god awful, but we were thankful for it. Nowadays, you've got movies with $100 million budgets.
People are going, meh.
Yeah, that was all right.
Yeah.
See, you guys are all spoiled.
Yeah, it's like we had to walk through 2 miles of snow to go see our movies back in the day. You guys could just drive up in your fancy cars.
Speaking of the alternative, that's weird alternate reality. I'm just glad you're here. Obviously we're big fans of you, but I'm like, oh, there's another Asian here. and then Jay Lee's here as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's always talking about diversity. It's starting to get better, right?
Yeah. I think Asians were probably the most represented within comic culture early on. I remember growing up, and there weren't a lot of. I remember there were a lot of Filipino artists that were coming up back in the 70s, I want to say. Nestor Redondo, Ernie Chan. A lot of these guys, like, I don't know if you guys know their work, but they worked on like John Carter, Warrior of Mars, and Conan the Barbarian. There's beautiful artwork, and those guys worked super cheap, super fast because of the 70s, and it's pre-royalties and everything. But yeah, it did make me feel good that there were Asians kind of working in this business, and yeah, I mean, subconsciously maybe it gave me the inspiration or the sort of the goal of trying to break in and do the same thing.
Yeah, and I remember growing up, I was reading comics, guys like me and Mike, and my parents were like, man, that will never amount to, stop, read books without pictures in them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then later on, as you come, I heard that you got a pretty sweet car collection. And I was like, see, I could have been Jim Lee. That's right. I could have been Jim Lee, man.
No, I've seen your art. You couldn't have been Jim.
Yeah, but
So you're saying you drew as a kid?
I mean, I tried to,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I was discouraged, but I pursued other things. Video games came along, like the Nintendo, and I went off on that. And I didn't become an esports champion either, but yeah, I was like, man, Lamborghini, so if I could have seen that in my future, it would have been pretty amazing.
No, you still would have failed. I mean, look, this man has talent. You, not so much. So,
But I think, loving what we did, it kind of worked out for all three of us.
of course it did. I mean, and it worked out for probably most of you out there in the audience as well. I mean, you wouldn't be the same people that you are now if you didn't have influencers like Mr. Lee here, like, or the other Mr. Lee, Stan. These guys are the ones who, especially the artists. And I mean, I look back, your heroes, my heroes, Jack Kirby. You had Dick Ayers. You had, and as you said, mostly white guys. But then you did have that influx of these guys who were super speedy. I mean, the lower tier books that they would put out, and those are some of my favorite books as a kid because not everybody was reading them. Like Secret Society of Supervillains. What a great, way ahead of its time. I mean, DC's putting out the Year of the Villain this year, and I'm like, well, who would have thought that? And I'm like, oh, I did when they were putting out Secret Society of Supervillains. So everything has its time and comes around. Like Stephen King says, cause a wheel, it always spins. There was no question there.
No. It was interesting that you said you came up during the time of Nintendo.
Yes.
So I was fortunate enough, I mean, I remember Pong going out.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I think video games, they were pretty much at the arcades, like in the malls, or at the bowling alley. So there were no home systems
Right.
at the time. So, yeah, I mean, really, and there were no movies out. So to me, like, I love the superheroes, I love the comic books, and so the only way I could get more stories and more adventures was to sit down and draw them myself, right? So I think it's, in a way, it's, on one hand, it's awesome that we have so much content that we can access 24/7. On the other hand, I feel like, in a way, it might be killing some of the creative drive that you guys might have if you didn't have so much of it. It was so good, you know? Because, like, yeah, I grew up on, like, giant insect movies.
Oh, yeah.
Right, you know, where they had giant ants and grasshoppers and they would terrorize these towns. Like, none of you guys have seen any of these movies, but this was like my Avengers Infinity War, you know?
Like, it was
yeah.
ants, killer ants.
Sure, right. And they'd be on like Sunday morning, and that's all that would be on. And I would just sit there and watch these movies, and then that would just kind of stimulate the same part of the brain that, again, that superhero comics did, and it would just stimulate me to kind of inspire me to draw and tell stories.
Yeah, and they weren't great, but you know, again, that's what we
Well,
had.
they're great to me,
Yes.
you know, but yeah.
And me, yeah.
Yeah.
I love them too. Those were the great ones. I'm looking out there and I'm like, you didn't see it. You did. I'm looking at the color of your hair. So, but I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the stuff like Mars Attacks were Topps trading cards back in the day. Nobody thought that would become a movie or, you know, become a comic book property, and yet somebody had the foresight to secure those rights and make a mint off them. So, and I think that, where are we going with this thing, since you threw that out there?
Oh, I have no idea.
All right, good enough. Stream of consciousness, which is, you know, my stop.
Good job.
Sorry,
But,
I was told you wanted the projectors.
Oh, no, I think it's all right. I think I would need a table.
Okay, I didn't know if
And
you
then
wanted to draw on your
microphones.
laptop,
That's
I
okay.
could probably set it up next to you.
Uh,
I mean, we have,
No, I think-
it'll connect to the television, but. This is our projector right here, so I was just setting it up next to you.
And,
it would be tricky.
we need a flat surface and
Yeah, okay.
It's all right.
Yeah,
paper,
sorry.
pencils.
Yeah.
did you just show a film strip? I mean,
Yeah. Did you just run out to Office Depot to buy that? It's like,
They were
oh,
using it next door in the creative station, so.
oh, well, fat lot of good is doing over there. We got Jim Lee over here, man. That's all right. I just learned that Jay Lee used to steal office supplies before he broke into the comic
Oh,
store. Yeah, did you ever string of crappy jobs before, you remember your
I only
job?
had crappy jobs.
You
So,
did?
yeah, I think comics was my first real, like, well, they weren't crappy jobs, but my best paying job before I got into comics, I delivered pizza in college, and I paid $12 an hour with tips back in the 80s.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was a fortune, right? But no, I worked at Six Flags over Mid-America, or St. Louis. I cooked chicken. I was 16. So I worked in a lab during the days doing tissue biopsies on rats at Barnes Hospital, and then I would drive like an hour and a half to Eureka to work at Six Flags. This one shipped from like 4 o'clock till midnight. So I was like 16. And then I did ditches, like I worked as labor for a friend, like my friend's construction company, my friends. But they, you know, we did that for a summer. And I worked in a warehouse at a hospital. I delivered pizza. Yeah, so this is it. This is the only real job I've ever had.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, thankfully, yeah.
Yeah, but right, crappy job. You literally dug ditches.
I think I was like 15, so I think that was the only thing I was qualified to do.
Yeah.
And it was to renovate these homes like in South St. Louis, and me and my friend. Yeah, but we loved it. Like, you know, you're using tools and you're breaking things, you know, and carrying around dirt and stuff. So, like I said, there was not a lot to do, you guys. There was no internet, so there are hours of freedom, like there are hours, extra hours of just boredom, and so this is what we would do.
All right, I just like to inspire people. I mean, you kept that dream alive in the back of your head that you.
Yeah, I think I was just happy to do something I think my parents asked me to, you know. I don't know, I just think, you know, these are all summer jobs, right? So, and then when I graduated from college, I knew at that point I wanted to work in comics. I moved back home, and then I set up a drawing table right next to my bed. And then for, I think 6 months, I was at home trying to draw a page a day, as if I had a job in comics already. And I got work in late November that year. So, yeah, and then I started out at Marvel, and then when I left and started Image, I learned a lot about the business, became, and that kind of set me up for the job I have at DC as publisher, and then having worked there, when we kind of merged with Warner Brothers, kind of moved me to this chief creative officer role, where I kind of go between comics and the media partners that we've got at Warner Brothers, Warner Media.
Pretty awesome path. Should we open it up for questions? We don't have a ton of time, but who's got a question? Sir?
Scott Williams was up yesterday, and he had mentioned Uncanny X-Men 267.
Yeah.
He said he got a call from him and asked if he could draw it up for you in a week, 7 days.
Maybe, okay.
Maybe I just wanted to get that your side of the story.
Was he complaining about me giving him work that was late, or?
No, we were talking about timetables.
Yeah, I think maybe it was like X-Men 266, which is the second appearance of Gambit, I think, right, 267.
Yeah.
So 266 first appearance of Gambit, 267 was a film issue. Back then, Marvel was doing twice monthly books of X-Men every summer, and so they were super late on that issue, and they needed 9 days, and so Scott, I talked to Bob Harris, who was the editor at the time, said we can do it in 9 days, but it was me, Wilson, Scott, and pencil and ink the whole book in 9 days, which, it's hard for one person to do 22 pages in 30 days, right? So to have 3 people do something even in 9 days was a lot of work, but that was a lot of fun. And everyone kind of leaned into the stuff that they were best at. So I did like layouts, and then Wilson would do pencils, and then Scott would do inks, and then I penciled and inked all the backgrounds. So we all kind of divvied up different things, and then towards the end, we started running out of pages to work on, and so we cut pages in half along the thing, so that one guy could work on a page while the other one was working on the other page. And so some of those pages are taped together in the middle. So that was a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. It's intense. It's just hard to do that month in, month out. It's not the same way of like living, so we never did it again. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
That sounds like the early days of comic books, where you'd hear stories of, like back in 1940s tenements, where a group of like 6 or 7 artists would sit around and they'd ink each other's stuff and they'd pass around pages. Yeah. And it's, to me, that just sounds so exciting, but I don't have that kind of talent, so I'd probably be the guy erasing all the mistakes.
There is a job for that. So yeah, I mean, I would fill in. I would fill in the shadows with ink and stuff. Whatever needed to be done. There's a lot of comic books, like old comics from the 70s, and sometimes the credit will be Manny, M-A-N-N-Y, hands. And that meant like usually like 6 different people worked on the book, right? Or to say M period hands, that also meant the same thing.
Code. Sir, do you have a question? You're not going to ask about acid, are you?
No, it's
Yeah.
going down.
I don't think Mr. Lee here is dropping acid.
I won't answer that.
Okay. What's your question, sir?
But I kind of want to know, just kidding. Like when you started out, I in one interview you kind of mentioned kind of like clearing your thoughts out before you start on your work. And that was an early interview you did with Stan Lee. He asked you kind of like how you begin your process. Now that you've come so far, do you find yourself harder to find your concentration in your space, or has it changed in any way from when you started off to now that you're more kind of, I guess you've been doing this for a while? So.
Now that I'm old? Yeah, sure.
That's not what I mean.
It has changed. I think that interview with Stan Lee was like 1990, 91 or something like that. And I didn't even remember until, I think, were you the one that told me like that I used to warm up drawing arms or something?
Oh, yes, sir.
That sounds reasonable. I don't know, but I don't do any of that anymore. I get the script, I sit down, I start drawing. So, and that's probably because I've been doing it for a long time. But even then, what happens though is that If you're rusty, you'll draw something, and hopefully you'll see that it doesn't look good. You erase it. You just redraw it. So you're actually warming up, just trying to draw. And like if I take 3 days off, it gets rusty, you know. But once you get going, like by the time you've done 7 pages in a row, that 8th page, I mean, you're moving probably twice as fast and erasing half as much as you were at the start, right? So it's cumulative knowledge that you're just kind of kicking the dust off of and kind of read down. It's kind of like the Matrix, like, okay, I know how to draw arms. Okay, now I know how to draw, you know, down shots of figures, right? And so a lot of that, I know it, but it's not necessarily in my short-term kind of memory. And so I have to kind of force it into my head through muscle memory of kind of moving my arm and hand and trying to actually draw.
So for portfolio review, what do you want to see in it from an artist?
So if you're an aspiring artist, I would say I need to see 3 pages of work. You don't have to show me more than 3. And they should be panel to panel work, no splash pages, maybe a half splash. But the most important thing is that you can tell the story, that it's clear from panel to panel, that I know exactly what's happening, that you understand what establishing shot is, like a far away shot, a medium shot, and a close-up, and what those shots do within the context of storytelling. And then good figure work, understanding a 3-point perspective, shadows, people in clothes, regular clothes, people in spandex. You know, most of the time, like when I see samples, it's always people just fighting, like superheroics, and that's great, but that might only usually take up 20% of the story. The rest of it is establishing the city, drawing vehicles, drawing emotion, you know, drawing buildings, and all that stuff. You have to be able to do to get to the
Is there anything you love particularly drawing? It's like, wow, that's a really great pencil I just did.
Alien monsters are the easiest.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
from our little.
So yeah, from a deadline point of view, the things that are easy to draw become your favorite things to draw. So the things I don't like to draw are like animals, like real animals, like cats and dogs,
Yeah.
and horses. You know, rats are really hard to draw too. Like I like look at what was that Disney show? What was that? Ratatouille
Yes.
or whatever. Yeah. So I like Google Ratatouille and see how they created a rat with expressiveness.
Right.
So, but I didn't want to go that cartoony, but that's kind of where I started.
Yeah. I hear, sir.
What was your inspiration behind the character Gambit?
So Gambit was a character, it was the 80s and Cajun food was really hot. It was like popular, right? Remember that?
Yeah, the Cajun
Yeah,
chef and
right.
I remember.
And this is how I remember it. I'm sure Chris has a different memory, Chris Norman. But yeah, so Cajun food was hot. Chris came up with the idea to have a Cajun superhero. And he had the name Gambit, which I thought was a really cool name. And I like Gambit, I like playing cards, and so I like this idea of using playing cards as part of his powers, but playing cards, and I had seen people use playing cards to like cut up fruit, that you could throw a card and hurt somebody with the card, like if you throw it fast enough, right? It's like a tornado sending a piece of straw through a tree or something. Theoretically, it happens, I don't know. But I was also really into science as a kid, and I said, oh, you know, his power should be that he excites valence electrons and atom and properties, and that's what he does. And if you excite valence molecules, things get to the point where they explode. And so the idea, it's like a microwave. Like he's a human microwave that supercharges things, and you know, because he's from New Orleans and he likes gambling and is a grifter, he would excite the valence electrons of playing cards so that they exploded upon impact. I don't know. So no one in comics really knows science, so they all kind of said, okay, that sounds great. And so no one really called into question whether this could happen or not, but that was sort of the genesis of it. And then this is when I was living in New York. And then I went back and drew some sketches up, came back the next day or some other time. So we were doing this in the offices of Marvel, you know, with Chris Claremont and Bob Harris. And that was a real cool part of actually living in New York City, and because everything now is done remotely. People live all around the world. They're, you know, Skyping and emailing stuff. There's very little that's done, you know, even on the phone, much less in person. So that was really a cool memory of creating something on the fly in person, you know.
Thank you. You back there.
Were you ever a fan of X Factor or X Force?
Never. Yeah. What are they your favorite books or?
Well, I'm a big fan of the X Factor government team.
Yeah. So when I worked on the X-Men, I was only a year or two removed from being like a super fan. So you know when that came out, what it was Butch Geist and Wheezy and Walt Simonson, I think, launched that, right? So anything with like mutants, I was like, they were my favorite characters of any publishing company, and X Factor was super cool just because it was the original team for the most part. I think it was all the original team, and those were my favorite mutants at the time, even more so than the new ones.
Thank you. Right there.
So, Jim, Rob made comments recently, Rob Liefeld, regarding the collapse of DC Comics within a year.
Yes.
I know you guys go way back.
Right.
How do you take that? Do you call up Rob and say, what are you doing mushrooms? Or where did this come from, and how personally do you take that?
Yeah, I think it was on Twitter. I don't take anything on Twitter too seriously. I'll tell you that there's just a lot of stuff on Twitter in general, and I found it's most healthy for me to just kind of use it as a tool to kind of share information, tweet out a picture of a meal here and there, and that's, for the most part, how I kind of interact with it. But I would say that, and this is not specific to just Rob, but I think in general, when I see some of the stuff I see online, I think deep down, if I could get really philosophical, I think we all want to be loved, right? We all want to be heard, and when that doesn't happen, sometimes people get frustrated, and so that's how I try to interpret a lot of stuff that I see, because otherwise it gets me kind of depressed thinking that all these people that supposedly love comics or movies, take go out of their way to troll or say such negative things. Like, it has to come from a different place than hatred, right? It has to come from something else. And so if you look at it from that lens, maybe it's a positive.
Do you find it weird? You just had work for you guys at DC. I just thought the time was just
I don't have the answers, but it's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about.
And I was going to thank you very much for, the elephant in the room. I was sitting here, do I ask Jim about this or do I? But you took the whole thing out of my hands and, just lit. And very nice shooting at that elephant in the room. That was good. You know what? If I can just speak as a fan. I mean, I love what DC's doing, but I think DC's been around for a lot longer than Rob Liefeld, and I think that his Nostradamus-like mental projection a year into the future, I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, I don't see DC folding its doors like, oh crap, Rob's on to us. Everybody, circle the wagons. It's not going to happen.
I'll take my chances too. You know what I'm saying?
You went to Kuwait for the U.S. military thing. How does it feel to have the impact of stuff that you've done stretch that far? How people are able to bond with their families back in the States, and how much of an impact did that have on you?
No, it was an awesome experience. I don't think so much about the reach of the characters as really I looked at the reverse, that it was amazing that they were so excited about comics, right? So it was not about the characters as much, but the fact that we kind of shared this love of this art medium or these characters, right? So it was incredibly touching and heartwarming and at the same time very kind of emotional, because you're going out there, you're really in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's a desert, it's 115 degrees.